Apparently, in this episode, or the next two episodes, Izu gets to be without Adato for a bit, she gets to interact with Fua, Horobi lets Jin hide behind him. I remember that, okay, I remember that bit, and he either tugs at Horobi's sleeve or Horobi pushes him further behind him, I can't remember. I remember that very specific movement though, it was cute. Fua rescues a Humagir, and there's a reaction from Fua about getting called to investigate Hiden. That all sounds amazing, why don't I keep going back to these? I can't wait to find out what I missed. I love the detective genre. So all they know about Ansatsu-Chan so far is that he is a Humagir who approached and shot Arada Shinya under the pretense of being an actor in training, but there are no records of a Humagir with his appearance having ever been manufactured. I'm curious on what the barcode is for. Ansatsu-Chan has a barcode, so you'd think either that is recognisable or it isn't, and his appearance shouldn't come into it. Or am I just missing something? I mean, this isn't me criticising anything, this is just me trying to make sense in my own head. Because the reason, as we find out later, that Ansatsu-Chan's appearance isn't recognised is because these black market people stole some festival dancers and changed their appearances, and they were then acquired by Horobi and Jin. Sorry, I shouldn't be thinking this much about it, but if a Humagir could be recognised by their barcode, then you'd think the black market people would remove it, or Horobi would have removed it afterwards at the very least, to avoid detection, but as it happens, clearly a Humagir isn't recognisable by their barcode. Otherwise it would have been either we don't recognise the barcode, or we do recognise the barcode, but it doesn't line up with his appearance. So what is it for? It's not even important. Moving on. Yua is like, maybe you missed something, and the detectives seem very offended by this, so Yua asks if they're aware of the hidden lab next to Hiden's main office, and Fua seems very unhappy about this, so not thrilled by this information just being handed to the detectives, because Fua cares, and Fua doesn't want this information getting out, because he's actually secretly super nice, really. Because of course they're not hiding that Hiden is behind all these attacks, but they do have other issues to keep secret, and both Fua and Yua would know that investigating this investigating this hidden lab would reveal the key making machine and a whole plethora of stuff they really can't risk getting out. We then cut to Adato reacting to this, like, hey, they're coming to inspect the lab, and Izu informs him that Zei is constructing a key as we speak. We really can't be having detectives swooping in. Adato also says, how did the police even know? So someone has informed either Adato directly or Izu, who then told Adato that the detectives are on their way to investigate the lab. When the police detective people come up, they say, we heard there's a hidden lab, which suggests to me that the detectives did not call Adato ahead of time, giving him a heads up. I mean, why would you? So did Fua call and let him know? If Izu was somehow listening in on all of this, then she'd know why the police know, but I don't think Fua would sell Yua out like that. But I could buy this he'd quickly contact Izu, like, quick heads up, they want to investigate the lab, but I don't think he'd say Yaiba told them about the lab. So the new plan is to clear the hidden name by tracking down this assassin themselves and grabbing the Zetsumarai key as evidence that the Humagir has been hacked. So that's what we're doing. But the new key that's being constructed in the secret lab right now is apparently crucial for that. So, they can't let the detectives go into the lab because they'll see the key being made, but they can't clear their names and throw the detectives off their scent without the key that's currently being made in the lab that they can't let the detectives go into. This is actually so tense. I love everything about this so far. We're less than 2 minutes in. The detectives have a bloody warrant too. Chuffy hell, they work fast. Before anything can happen, before they start forcing their way into the lab, enter Detective Wazu. Get it? Because he's an old model Humagir and he's Izu's older brother, so it's was and is. Also, Nazo is derived from mystery and Toku means special. And apparently if you combine them into Nazotoku, it basically means to solve a mystery. Usually I use my own knowledge of Japanese for this bit, but I'm looking at the wiki for this. Because Toku or Tokusatsu comes from Tokushu Satsue, Tokushu meaning special and Satsue meaning photography. So if you put it together, you get tokusatsu, which we shortened down even further into just toku, so we've removed the photography part entirely, and it's just special. I actually really like this name. I talk a lot about how it irks me that Human Gear seem to be always just named after their jobs. Their entire identities relate to their work, but honestly, Nazotoku sounds like the kind of name you'd arrive at if you were trying to create a detective character and name him something clever. It doesn't feel like you're an actress so your name is acting. It feels at least like he has a bit more of an identity. Obviously, Nazotoku is not a name. You wouldn't meet somebody in real life called Wazu Nazotoku. But I don't know, maybe I'm just feeling very optimistic today. Maybe it's just because I personally really like quirky detective characters. They don't feel like I'm watching someone whose entire identity is their job, in the sense that Human Gear usually are. More like I'm just watching a quirky detective show. Why is Izu the secretary's older brother a detective? Why was Kurenosuke's pride and joy specifically a detective? There's something there, isn't there? Was Kurenosuke so paranoid that he needed a private detective? What's the correlation here? Is this going to be explained later on and I'm just musing for no reason? Over at daybreak, Ansatsu-Chan is strapped down on the wheelchair, I believe, and Horobi tells Jin he had to force him into shutdown and he confiscated the Zetsumarais key, which Adato and Izzy need as evidence. I feel like I'm watching a football match right now. We need to keep our eyes on this key. He confiscated the key, like a dad, because his adopted son was misbehaving with it. You'll get it back when you've apologised, Ansatsu-Chan. I'll go to your room and think about what you did. And Ansatsu-Chan, who's not shut down, says, it's because he fears me. Why are the most interesting things happening in green? This series is so hakuoki. We spend most of the time stuck in the bloody compound and then we sit and talk about all the interesting stuff that happened in the battle off screen. We're just stuck making tea and then someone else
runs in like Kondu's being shot. You can see where my mind is at right now. The idea that Horobi does actually fear Ansatsu-Chan in this moment is huge. Obviously this comes from
Ansatsu-Chan, not Horobi, and just because he says Horobi is scared of him does not mean Horobi is scared of him. But Horobi forced him into shutdown, took his key, and if that's all he did, then I'd be inclined to say, well, maybe he's just being careful, maybe the Ark has realised Ansatsu-Chan doesn't want to listen anymore, and told Horobi to stop him before anything happens. The Ark can predict things, right, so maybe the Ark was like, yeah, I don't like where this is going, and shut down the whole operation. But he's tied up. It wasn't enough to shut him down, Horobi tied him up as well, and he's just standing there staring at him before Jin comes in. If shutting him down, tying him up, and then staring at him to make sure he is indeed still tied up doesn't suggest that Horobi might actually be scared of him right now, I don't know what does. Just, especially the standing there watching him part. It's like when you find a spider in your room and you just spend the entire day staring at it because the one thing worse than seeing a spider in your room is suddenly not seeing the spider in your room. Ansatsu-Chan was in his Kamen Rider form the whole time, but when he says that Horobi is scared of him, he then goes back to his human-looking regular form and Jin cowers behind Horobi. And Ansatsu-Chan at this point has not done anything threatening towards Jin at this point. In fact, Jin was kind of leaping to his defence with, but he's grown so much after Horobi told him he shut him down and took his key. But I don't see why Ansatsu-Chan in fact still being awake and reverting back to his regular appearance would frighten Jin. So I personally see it as the thing making Jin suddenly scared of Ansatsu-Chan is in fact the suggestion that Horobi is scared of him, because if Horobi is scared of something, then that's bad, that's worthy to be scared of, if even Horobi is intimidated. So Jin hides behind Horobi, clinging to his sleeve, and Horobi is still glaring at Ansatsu-Chan. And Ansatsu-Chan now has these little metallic egg things which he throws into the air, and they hit these two blank Human Gear that are beside him. I'm not sure why, but they're there. And he converts them into Dodo Magia. I swear they actually have a specific name, but I can't for the life of me recall it right now. As this happens, both Horobi and Jin move back, and I can't
tell if Jin is pulling Horobi's arm, or Horobi is nudging Jin further
behind him, but both are adorable. More specifically though, I think there's a lot to be said that when Jin sees danger, he hides behind Horobi. When Jin sees danger, Horobi is safety. And there's absolutely no you're old enough to look after yourself here. Horobi is perfectly happy shielding Jin from this danger here. That's what I love about Metsubo Jin and I, that there are so many small moments you really have to look at. Because Horobi might say things like Jin being old enough to look after himself, but he does things like this, and actions speak louder than words, don't they? His bigger actions may be fueled by the arc and the narrative that the arc has pushed onto them, but it's little subconscious moments like these that really paint a picture. It's Horobi shielding Jin from Ansatsu-Chan, it's Horobi walking behind Jin, fighting in front of him, and then walking behind him again. It's Horobi watching Jin and making sure he knows where he is and that he isn't going anywhere before continuing. The kind of moments you could totally buy Shinagawa actually just deciding, because I swear he and Nakagawa were like 90% responsible for Horobi and Jin. What is that? It's like a torso on the floor. That can't be what it is. I swear there's a piece of fabric or something draped over it with very defined abs. There's even a belly button, I can see it. It can't be. What is going on with their decor? Okay, so Horobi and Jin fight the dodo thingies. I'm sure they're called something. And Horobi drops the key. This is honestly so tense. I am really invested in the whereabouts of this key. Ansatsu-Chan snaps free and picks up the key, so Ansatsu-Chan now has the key after all. And he says there's nothing left for him to learn now, and he mesmerizes. Even though Ansatsu-Chan's journey was quite short, it has been absolutely fascinating. He started off so childish and ended up so unsettling. He used to be so sweet and innocent, as much as an assassin can be, and now he's dark and threatening, and it's just been such an amazing insight as to how much this can change someone. Seeing how he used to be and then how he ended up. We never see how any of Metsuba and I used to be before being hacked. We can only speculate with the little evidence we've been given. But we have seen Ansatsu-Chan's entire journey. Not only was it fascinating, but it's also great evidence into just how much someone so innocent and naive and adorable can be twisted and manipulated and shaped into this dark, threatening assassin. It's food for thought. If Ansatsu-Chan has been corrupt and changed this much by the arc's influence, why shouldn't that be the same for anyone else? How did Horobi and Naki and Akazuchi used to be before they were hacked? Actually, though, to be perfectly honest, I picture Akazuchi at least having been basically exactly the same as he is now. Wazu is so sneaky and I love it. So apparently he's quite the legend, and while the police and Fukuzoi are going on about him, he sends a sneaky text to Adato telling him to pretend he's talking to a customer, all the while acting like he's about to start giving out autographs. I love him! This is the kind of sneaky detective stuff I live for. He starts sneakily talking to Adato and Izu about how he knows all about the key, the one Zero is currently making, not the Zetsumarais key, and that he has an idea to get them out of this, but Izu thinks it's too suspicious and that doing what Wazu suggests would be dangerous, but Adato accepts anyway. As soon as he accepts, Wazu gets him back on track, which I feel is so clever because it's the police that have provided this distraction from the case, and Wazu is like, oh yeah, we should really be getting back to the case. So because he's the one drawing attention back where it should be, but they don't want it to be, it kind of removes any doubt and suspicion because he's clearly being a good humour gear doing his job. If it was on Adato's side, he wouldn't be drawing attention back to the investigation. Hold up, so it's not that they need to keep Adato's identity as Zero One a secret because he then henshins in front of him. So is it the actual technology behind it? That people can know he is 01, but the actual specifics of the system has to be kept secret, and that's why they can't see the lab? That is why Izu doesn't have a backup, isn't it? Because the Kamen Rider 01 system is deemed more important than Izu's life. The police are really shocked by this, so clearly Adato being 01 isn't common knowledge, but it's not super secretive anymore if he's going to be so flippant about it. I don't know why Adato chose to do this. It could have been clever to show off this thing for them to focus on, to get away from the actual secret, but this is the secret, isn't it? The 01 system? Also then draws attention to the fact he's running away. I suppose it did create a head start for Adato where the police are so shocked by what they've just seen that it doesn't quite click that he's getting away. But anyway, so the police go off to chase him. So, to recap, Adato and Izu need the Zetsumarais key to clear their name and prove that Ansatsu-Chan is in fact a hacked humour gear. The police want to investigate the secret lab. Adato told them that he's forgotten the password into the secret lab. Adato has revealed 01 to the police, Ansatsu-Chan has the key. Right, okay, yeah, so Krekeorca made a detective humour gear because of all the talks about taking over humour gear, basically. You know, ARC stuff. So that's why he created a detective to figure out what the bloody hell is going on? That makes sense. And his investigations led him to Metsuba. Right, okay though, let me just have this for a minute. This is going absolutely nowhere, but right. Wazu was hand-created by Krekeorca, and because he was, for all intents and purposes, Izu's prototype that makes them siblings. So, first of all, why then doesn't Horobi, having been made from Soryo's data, make them siblings? Second of all, we have Soryo, who was Adato's dad, who was Koronosuke's grandson. We have Will, who was Koronosuke's secretary, wasn't he? Was he? I don't quite remember. And obviously I am aware that films aren't strictly canon, especially the crossover films, but I do believe what we saw specifically in the film about Daybreak was then talked about in the partial clip episode as fact. Some of it at least. So let me have this. Okay, we have Soryo and we have Will and we have Bot, who created Horobi from Soryo's coding. We have Wazu, who was handcrafted by Koronosuke to be a detective, and then of course we have Ikazuchi and Naki. I am way too invested in the older generation Human Gear we know. I would love just one story about them, just all of the older generation Human Gear we've met. I want to know if they know each. I want to know if they knew each other, because they obviously existed in close proximity. I'm just very invested in them. I can't do much about this series. We meet one person for like 2 minutes, and I immediately want to know their entire life story. Anyway, back to the actual episode. Now the plan is, they still need the key of evidence, I assume, but Wazu and Izu are going to uncover the identity of the actual culprit, Ansatsu-Chan, while Adato distracts the police and aims by doing a runner. Okay, that does explain why he henshined then, so he can actually evade the police. But he ends up running into Yua anyway, and says, wasn't it you who told the police in the first place? So maybe my earlier theory isn't right then. No, he said, how do they even know? So clearly he had to have found out afterwards. No, it still stands, I think. Ignore me. Adato says, this is how Zaya does things, and Yua hesitates, meaning Adato could then evade her, because Yua is so not 100% certain with Zaya and is absolutely being manipulated too. Horobi and Jin are fighting the, what are they called? Dodo Magia chicks. Aww! Oh, that's cute! Okay, so Horobi and Jin are fighting the Dodo Magia chicks, but then actual Ansatsu-Chan attacks Jin. Jin falls, and we see Horobi and Jin pretty far apart, both surrounded by these chicks, and then all of a sudden they're back to back as Jin's going, Horobi! In a very frightened voice. Aww. Oh, Horobi getting close to Jin in battle. And Jin sadly collapsing on his knees after. That's so sad. I wish I knew what happened immediately after. I wish we'd have stayed on that for like a few more seconds, because clearly Horobi had to have said something to get Jin to keep going, but it can't have been something like stop being sad, because Jin's still visibly sad later. Jin is clearly comfortable with his emotions to express them like this. Adato then asks Izu how things are going, and Izu says she thinks they should dispose of Wazu. He's not doing his job properly. Apparently he's just spent this entire time messing around and having fun and not actually investigating, and Izu is getting frustrated. Adato even asks Izu if she's angry, and she says she doesn't comprehend the question with a tired expression that would very much suggest otherwise. I really have my issues with Izu and Adato. I don't want to veer off onto a tangent about this, but I do find it really disturbing just how much she idolises one person. She doesn't really get to interact with other people. It's like Adato's feelings have been pushed onto her and she doesn't really get to have her own thoughts and opinions. And while I don't buy into the idea that you have to argue in a relationship, that it's unhealthy if you don't, with Izu, with Human Gear in general, that's different. Human Gear are very easy to manipulate. AI would not develop the way humans do. Humans would have a much better grasp of themselves than an AI would, and I think I needed to see Izu disagreeing with Adato more and being seen to have her own opinions, ones that are different from Adato's, and that being okay. I needed to see Izu become her own person and not just someone Adato wanted her to be. And as far as I remember, this is really the only time we see Izu and Adato having a difference of opinion, and that's nice. I do wish the one time we see her having a difference of opinion wasn't still work related. Even if it had been adjusted a little. Time is really of the essence right now, so I would understand that Wazu is wasting time. The police will catch on before he even starts to make headway. I think we need a plan B. But it seems like she's purely focusing on his work ethic, and I just wish it wasn't that. It's still very focused on Human Gear and their work. Her concerns are still about work. Does that make sense? But anyway, getting back to Wazu. He keeps trying to get Izu to think of him as family and tells her a glare will only make life harder, just like that guy over there. And he points out Fua, who's doing a terrible job of hiding in the shadows, and just the very casual way Wazu was like, yeah, we see you looking over there, you weirdo. just casually calling attention to him. I can't stress enough how much I love this character. I also can't stress enough how terrible Fua's hiding spot is, especially since he easily could have taken a few more steps to the right and he'd have been concealed. But anyway, it turns out Wazu has already figured it out and a van tries to escape, but Fua henshins and bloody punches it, and the whole black market story is revealed. You know, it's going to be really hard convincing, however, that humanity is actually quite nice when you've got stuff like this going on. Human gear just thrown into the back of a van, stripped of their appearances, and modified to be sold on the black market. What on earth do people want to use black market human gear for? It's not like human gear actually have protection. We see them treated horribly. Basically slave labour, and no one seems to want to rush to their defence and stop this mistreatment from happening. So what nefarious stuff could you possibly need a black market human gear for when you could already get away with so much? I don't even want to think about it. This is by far the most disturbing aspect yet. So anyway, we learn that Ansatsu-Chan, or the Ansatsu-Chans, were originally a group of festival dancers called Matsuda Z. Apparently these 5 festival dancers were reported stolen, so I'd love to know if there's ever an active investigation going on about this. I mean, this is kidnap, except it's not, it's theft of company property or whatever, but I would love for somebody to consider this as kidnap. It also turns out that while Wazu was messing around, he was actually gathering eyewitness reports, and he learned about the 5th Matsuda Z, because apparently only 4 were stolen by Metsubo Junrai. Fu was actually quite impressed by Wazu's deductions. That's so nice, actually. Actually deducting though, can I talk about this for a second? Deducting is when you have a hypothesis from actual facts, you gather evidence and you reach a conclusion. So, Wazu knew the 5 Matsuda Z units were stolen. He also knew Ansatsu-Chan was not a human gear recognised by hidden intelligence and was revived 3 times, so that's 4 units. Therefore, he theorised that the Ansatsu-Chan units were in fact the stolen Matsuda Z units. He spent some time gathering evidence, speaking to people, gathering eyewitness reports, and his hypothesis is proven to be correct. This is deduction! So, BBC Sherlock, if you don't even know what deduction means, if you're going to claim to use your skills of deduction and then proceed to do inductive reasoning, then I can't trust a single word that comes out of your mouth. Right, no, this is my channel, I'm doing it. Deductive reasoning would be, I exist, pigs exist, therefore I am a pig. Outdated reference, but the point is, Matsuda Z units went missing, Ansatsu-Chan is not recognised by Hiden, therefore Ansatsu-Chan is in fact the missing Matsuda Z units. These human gear went missing, and now suddenly new human gear have popped up, therefore they're one and the same. This is making a deduction. Inductive reasoning would be looking into a field, spotting a handful of pigs, and then reasoning that every single animal in this field must therefore be a pig. So when Sherlock has John's phone, sees that there are scratch marks on the charging port, generalises that most people with scratch marks on their charging ports must be alcoholics, therefore John's brother, who is in fact his sister, is an alcoholic, is inductive reasoning, even if it's incredibly ableist, even hearing the name Harry, I think, or something like that, reasoning that most people he knows called Harry are men, therefore John is talking about his brother, would be inductive reasoning, because inductive reasoning works on generalisation. He's not deducting stuff. I also hate myself for having talked about Mr. Sherlock. It irks me. I do not like it. Thank you, 01, for understanding the difference. Back to the episode. Wazu is stalking the 5th Matsuda Z, like you can hear the Pink Panther theme in the background, and Z Gogo, as he's known, is backing away because he can clearly see the suspicious human gear very animatedly stalking him, and he runs away. But he's caught by the last Ansatsu-Chan, and he says, "It's me, Gogo, Yongo." He remembers! Then he attacks Gogo and he runs away while Fur fights him. Adato also joins the fight, but of course they can't fight Ansatsu-Chan as he is right now without the new key. Thank God it's just the second being finished. However, Wazu tells me he's better off using the Breaking Mammoth, I think. But Adato goes to the original plan and uses this new key. And then the episode ends. Why was he better off using Breaking Mammoth? I'm so intrigued now, I don't remember this at all. But this has been one hell of an exciting episode. I'm so excited for the next one.